spirits. Welcome back to another episode of the Flying Upstream podcast. I am your host, Louisa Anderson, and today we have our beautiful co host, Kristen Medeiros, and a powerful session with an incredible guest that's going to share with us their own story of resilience, their own experiences. And as always, do not forget to like, follow, and share our episodes. Remember that we are here to talk about the unconventional. We are here to share the beauty of life that doesn't necessarily look like everyone else's journey. And yes, so yeah, we are going to jump right in today and introduce our guest. Satty, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Satty, and I'm from the UK, and I am an artist, an author, uh, an addiction advocate, and a mother. And just recently became a number one co-author in a book, a collaborative book as well.
Wow, congratulations on that. That's so exciting. I'd love to hear a bit about your journey to where you are today. So, take us back to the beginning. What was your whole experience like that led you to this amazing spot that you're in today?
Oh gosh, it's a long story. Um, First of all, I had a very traumatic childhood, and that's what started me on my journey through addiction. I started very early drinking and smoking and doing drugs, and I loved it, and I got married at 15, had a forced marriage at 15 in India, came back to England, and then on my 16th birthday, I left home, and it was party time. Um, and I thought I was living the best life that I possibly could. Um, but actually, in reality, I wasn't. Um, I became pregnant at 33, got this amazing son, but I still couldn't give up my addictions. Some of them had lessened, but I was still drinking a lot and gambling a lot. Um, and it came to a head when I was 51. Um, my son said that he didn't want to know me anymore, and I was heartbroken. And then that's what led me into wanting to get recovery. And that's how I got the new life that I've got now, is through recovery and working the 12 steps of recovery. Um, and yeah, life is just done a turnaround from spending 50 years hating myself to spending 5 years loving myself. And the love for myself just gets better and better every day. And then it just spreads. It's a ripple effect. So yeah, I'm so happy about life now. Like, yeah.
That's what we love to hear. We love to hear the journeys that bring us to the place. I call it the other side, right? I call it the side we um, where we get to experience happiness, where we get to create our own path, walk a journey that we can be proud of, which it sounds like it's where you are. I Because what we do here is celebrate the unconventional and also the objective of amplifying people's voice and helping our audience sort of understand how we got to this beautiful place that, what I call the other side that we get to be on. Can you share with me what you think leads to addiction? And I'm sure there's a lot of literature on this out there, but your perspective on what you think led you down the path of addiction.
So for me, it was a matter of escape. So when I had my first cigarette, I
Mhm.
just had this warmth. It sounds really stupid. It was only a cigarette, but when I was inhaling it, I remember the warmth I felt. My first drink, it was Martell brandy, and I was 9. and I could feel that warmth. And it was like having someone put a big fleecy blanket over me full of love and comfort and care, which I hadn't experienced. And within those seconds, I was able to forget my life. And it was a slow ripple again effect that grew and grew. Even when I was 16 and I left home, I didn't think I was an addict, but I was, because I couldn't go without it. It's For me, it was trauma. I had to forget what I was living through, and the only way I could do that was by enhancing other emotions, other feelings, which were like the warmth, the love, the care, which I got from alcohol and cigarettes. And gambling gave me that rush of excitement and, adrenaline at first. So, and thing with addiction is, over the years, I've heard stories of people who've come from a lovely family, or have had just average, but they've still become an addict. And one thing I think is, if I didn't have the traumatic childhood I had, I would have still been an addict. I've got an addictive personality. Some people may vary on that, but there's people in the fellowships that totally identify with that addictive personality. No matter what would have happened, I would have become an alcoholic, a drug addict, a compulsive gambler. It was inevitable. But what wasn't inevitable was actually how bad it can get and how close it could have got for me in so many different ways. You know, when you're trying to kill yourself, you're trying to kill yourself. And you don't realize that actually God's got another plan for you. But in those moments, you don't care about God. You're so much in pain. You've caused so much hurt. The people that you love and trust hate you. There's nothing left, and you don't care. And then you join a 12-step program, and then you start working the steps, and you get a sponsor, and people are trying to teach you how to be a woman, how to be a lady, how to speak properly, how to have a conversation, even. Men are teaching me how that men can be trusted, that, not all men are utter, I can't think of the word, edits, should I say. And now my life is completely changed. The people I have around me are people I would never have around me before, because I only wanted to drink and with people who could drink. I only wanted people who could do drugs the way I could do drugs to be around, because otherwise, it wasn't the same. I don't drink like normal drinkers, so yeah.
I so appreciate, Satty, the way that you are explaining this, because I think this is important, that if you haven't been in this situation, it's sometimes hard to understand, which is that addictive personality and that feeling of like you almost don't have a choice. It's not like you were like, yeah, let me kill myself. That sounds fun. No, you're like, I'm seeking that warmth you talked about, comfort, something that you didn't have. This is how you got it. And like you said, you would have ended up there one way or the other. And so the fact that you're able to take that step back, to find help and be successful at that is huge. So I really want to say congratulations. That's a major accomplishment. And I'm curious to know a little bit more about what that moment was that it flipped for you. And because I will tell you, so I would tell myself like, oh, I never had a drinking problem, but I did. I was a hardcore drinker in college, in my 20s. It's what everyone did. And then one day you're like, I'm not 20 anymore. And it's not that fun to wake up hungover.
Yeah.
And now I don't drink, but I was able to do it on my own terms, right? I was fortunate. I never got to a place that I hit rock bottom. I just decided for myself, I don't want to do this anymore. So tell me about like that conversation with your son. What was that moment where you're like, oh, this is real. Like I have to commit to making a change.
He was going off to uni. It'd been rocky for a few years. It had been quite rocky for a few years. And you know, like when your children say they hate you, it's natural. You know, all children hate their parents, but no, this was a different kind of hatred. And when he said he would always say, "When I leave this house, I'm never coming back." And when he was off to uni, he said, you know, that he wasn't coming back, and it kind of just too much. I this overwhelming fear of losing him
Mm.
and the effects of my addictions, I think. It was like you know, like just before you're supposed to die, you're supposed to see your whole life flash against you. You know, I just saw this whole life with me in darkness without him. Like he was my light. And I never knew it until he said those words. And it's something I don't really talk about a lot because I don't know why I don't talk about it a lot. We just don't normally get to talk about it. But that moment, I just felt this dread, this fear of me on my own without him. And I had to do something to not prove to him that I'm okay or anything, but I had to clear my own act up, and I had to do it for me so that I could be there for him. So, because all those years I wasn't there for him, I managed to be a part-time mum, really, and
Yeah.
a very weak mum at that. I'm glad I had friends around that used to be able to look after him. You know, it's so hard to think about the damage that an addict conflicts on their nearest and dearest. It's heartbreaking when you think about it. It's heartbreaking to be a mother and not be able to give up her addictions, you know, because that pull is so hard. And then in my head, I think, well, I did it then. Why couldn't I have done it earlier? And it's just because I just hadn't had enough. You know, there's no way then I did. You know, I always say that, you know, God's got a purpose, and my life was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Happiness, pain, drama, everything, just for me to be led here tonight with you guys.
Yes, yes. And, you know, I am just based on my own personal experience, I'm a big believer in that we are exactly where we need to be. We experience life. You know, I believe that nothing happens just because. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe that our journey here in this lifetime is set out, you know, by us in one way or another, one capacity or another. And I believe that we are led by a higher power. You know, for you, you're calling it God. And I believe that God did lead you through that journey so that you would end up exactly here today with us sharing this story, because I do believe there's someone out there that needs to hear it. And you've made a couple of points that I want to touch up on. There's a lot of them, but I'm going to pick one. in honor of, time and our message here on this podcast. And I'm going to go with community, but I want to do touch just very briefly on the other two. One of them is you mentioned, how you don't talk about it enough, and in relation to, like when you were speaking about your son. I think that that's part of why Kristen and I do this podcast, is because there are so many topics that are so life changing and that affect us every single day, and not just us, but our children, which therefore affects the next generation, and therefore affects the evolution of everything and of all of us. We don't talk about it enough. And I believe that, even though I think a lot of people would not agree with me, that addiction is something that we don't talk enough, because there are so many different forms of addiction. And leading right from that one thing that you mentioned, the other thing that you mentioned is you hadn't had enough. I think that's kind of controversial. I think that's kind of like, a lot of people will be like, oh, like an addict saying they hadn't had enough. It's kind of contradictory to, your recovery journey. But I think that is something that honestly merits its own whole conversation, is because it goes back to the idea that we are exactly where we are supposed to be, right? Experiencing life the way that we are supposed to be experiencing it. So I love those points that you've made, but I want to come back to community, because there were quite a few things that you mentioned that I think are kind of beautiful in ways that we can say today that I'm sure didn't feel beautiful at the time. But you mentioned being grateful that you had great friends, that even though you were a part-time mom, you felt like that you had great friends that were there for you, and probably, it sounds like, assisted in the raising of your son, to be able to get him to this place where he could go off to uni, because we talk about that, but that's quite a privilege that a lot of people don't get. Um, what do you think life would have been like for you and or your son if you didn't have the positive impact of community that you got to experience to get you even into that 12-step program that has changed your life?
I wouldn't be here. That's it. If I didn't have any of that, I would not be here right now. And my son would be living with my friend Trace or Maz or something. Yeah, because it was getting that bad. It was getting to the point that it hurt, and I knew it wasn't fun anymore, and no, I hadn't had, I mean, when I came into the fellowship, I wasn't homeless, but I'd been homeless before. I hadn't, 1 year I moved 12 times in a year because I couldn't pay the rent because I was gambling it all, but if it wasn't for the love of my church and my friends who were around me and family, you know, that kept us together. And not just that, actually, social services, they were a big 90% of the reason why we stayed together, because I was so ill when I was pregnant. I couldn't hold him as well. So the maternal bonding wasn't there from the very beginning. So he had 24-hour home care and stuff. So all that helped the relationship between me and my son. Um, I honestly know that if I hadn't have got to the point where I was, I would have, yeah, I wouldn't be here. It's as simple as that. And Ethan may not be here. So I'm blessed because just God put these amazing people in my life, because I wasn't going to keep him because it was just too hard. Everything was just so hard. There's many twists and turns in my story. But, I've got a wonderful son. He put himself through uni. He's at home at the moment. I'm really proud of him, really proud of him. And I'm here and I'm present for whenever he needs me. And that's the most important thing that I can ever do for him, is be a present mum.
That is so sweet. I'm a mom too, and that, yeah, I agree. I can't imagine life without my kids.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I love to hear how important your son is to you and what a giant change you're willing to make for him. I'm curious to know about your book and if that
Ah,
had any part in your healing process and kind of tell me a little bit more about that.
okay. So, art has always been a part of my life since I was little. It's been something where I've really been able to engage into it and lose myself into it. Same as the telly, I would just lose myself. So when I became clean and sober and gamble free, I wrote a book. Well, I produced a book called Recover with Colour, and it helps people uh, work out their emotions and colours and what the, what would bring them, what color would bring them joy, or if they're angry, what kind of emotions and colors are coming out. Then I did a second book, which was Recover with Your Daily Suggestions, which is in a 12-step program. You've got your gratitude list, your journaling, and your inventory. And then I've done a book with Mandy Nicholson, who is a course tutor of the creative. She's a creative genius, and it's me and 30 other women. And I wrote about the 12 promises of which come about when you work your 12 steps of recovery in a 12-step program. So it's a book about working through being neurodivergent and creative at the same time, and how that impacts your life. And the way it impacts my life is I'm so much happier now that I know so much more about me, and I'm not fearful like I used to be. And the addiction is addiction, but there is life after addiction. There is love after addiction, there's healing, so I want people to step beyond addiction and have the life that I've got. So uh, my chapter in the book is all about how promise one what I used to be like and what I am now, you know. So I love the promises. I think everyone should do the 12 steps of recovery um, and have a better life. So there's that one. And it's an amazing book. And like I said, it got to #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. So that was amazing. The book launch was beyond spectacular. I met people that I've been working with for at least 2.5 years that I'd never even met apart from on a screen. So to be able to actually hug other creative women that I've been working with on the course with Mandy was amazing, and we had such a blast. So yeah,
That's
life
amazing. It's
after addiction is amazing.
That's amazing. I thank you for sharing that. I think there is so much power in what you just shared. We started talking about, how you were an addict, and we're ending this conversation with you are an author. And what a beautiful, beautiful way to kind of summarize your story, right? It shows that where we start is not necessarily where our story ends. And most of all, I want to point out that we have that power. It is within us, the power to change, the power to choose our own story, the power to walk our own path is within each and every one of us. And I want to wrap this all up because you kind of already started to wrap it all up for us so beautifully. I want to ask you to share one piece of wisdom or advice that you would offer to anyone listening who may be struggling with addiction or may be supporting someone who is struggling with addiction.
That's a tough one, because there's so many things the person needs to know is A, that they are loved, and that it doesn't matter if you don't love yourself because I will love you. And I think that is one of the things that I find people literally break down over when you say that to
Mm.
them, because they don't, I don't feel loved. I hated myself. I hated myself. I used to put cigarettes on my skin, you know? So when someone said to me, they'll love me, it choked. It really choked. And all I could say was, something off. It took 4 or 5 months for that first barrier to break down and for me to feel those feelings. And the other thing is, there's always someone out there to listen, always. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is, what if it's someone's wedding, if it's a funeral, if you need to speak to someone, guess what? Message me on Facebook, you know, I'll message you back. There's loads of addiction anonymous WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. There is support in so many different ways. And if you have an addiction, there'll be a 12-step program for it.
Those are very powerful words. Thank you so much, Satty, for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us tonight. Your resilience is inspiring, and we're so grateful for everything that you've shared. Thank you. And to all our free spirits out there, if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Flying Upstream. Thank
Thank
you.
you for being a part. Thank you for being a part of our community. Until next time, and as always, remember, keep questioning, keep exploring, and